I think I had more of like a time frame of realization that like the way that I looked at girls or like people that were not just of the opposite gender as me, like I had a romantic attraction to them. Um it was sort of like me just having a period of time like in middle school just being like, oh, like learning about the LGBTQ community and sort of realizing that that was something that I felt comfortable identifying as.
For me, and I'm sure it's the same way for a lot of other people, it wasn't a specific moment, but it was a bunch of little moments that clicked once I figured out what bisexuality and pansexuality were.
I can't remember a specific moment or event that sparked my realization that I was queer. I just remember not thinking I was queer, and then randomly knowing that I was queer. I remember not thinking it was a big deal and not telling anybody right away. The first time I said it out loud was at summer camp, to a fairly small group of people. It initially felt strange, just because it was a new thing for me, but I quickly felt comfortable again.
Are you out? I am out. I'm out to everyone. I come out probably like 3 times a day to random people. I can't go 3 seconds without making a joke or saying something to the effect that I am gay. I was lucky to have a really supportive family and really supportive friends. So it was pretty easy for the most part, which I was so lucky to have, which is a good thing.
Yes, I've been out and I feel very lucky to be able to be out. I realize that that is not a privilege that everyone in this world has, unfortunately. My coming out experience was I woke up one morning. I had not really planned this. I woke up one morning and it was the day of like the Women's March of 2018, and I woke up and I was like, I'm gonna come out today. Like, I don't know where that came from.
I'm out to everyone in my life other than my family. When I came out, no one was surprised because many had suspected it of me before. Even today, I get told I don't look straight. Even though many of my peers can tell I'm gay just by looking at me, my family can't tell. This works to my advantage because they're homophobic, so their ignorance is safer for me.
I still don't know what label my queerness falls under. I go one day at a time. In a way, I'm constantly coming out to myself and others on an as-needed basis. However, I'm not out to a lot of my community. While it's largely accepting in my community, being queer puts me into another box. In my experiences as a queer man, heterosexual relationships with cisgender women become harder or impossible if they already know about my queerness. In addition, coming out to my cisgender heterosexual male friends has often led to some awkwardness and changes in the friendship dynamic.
What advice would you give to anyone questioning or coming to terms with their sexuality? I'd say that definitely take it slow. It's okay to take your time to figure things out.
I think one of the most stressful things can be choosing labels for yourself. I give you permission to click other on surveys and put questioning or not straight instead of beating yourself up for not feeling confident in how you identify. It is nice to feel like a label describes you, but it's also your own identity, and that's very complex, and it's completely okay to not fit into a category. Another thing I'd say is that feeling ashamed of your sexuality is a normal part of coming out. We've all dealt with internalized homophobia. I still deal with it every day, even a year later, and you don't have to feel guilty for it.
I would definitely, my first piece of advice would be to be kind to yourself. Everybody's experience coming to terms with their sexuality is completely different. So don't expect yourself to kind of have it all figured out at once. When I came out, I didn't know myself. And still to this day, I am still trying to figure a lot of stuff out. So just trust that everything will fall into place and you will understand yourself at some point. There's no need to rush.
Figuring out who you are and your identity is a lifelong process, and sexuality is it's a spectrum. There's not going to be, you might not fit in anywhere, and that's okay. It's okay to not have like a label or to have preferences or anything like that. You are who you are, and that's all good.
I don't watch many movies or read a lot of books, but I do listen to a ton of music. Rina Sawayama is a singer-songwriter who I've really looked up to as a queer role model, especially since there's already a lack of POC/Asian visibility in Western media. Queer Asian women are even rarer. Her song Cherry encapsulates the restrictive feelings towards embracing one's identity due to stigma and prejudices.
One of my favorite queer role models is Abby Wambach. She played for the U.S. women's national team, and she just advocates for LGBTQ plus rights as well as being an amazing soccer player. And she also advocates for the rights of other minorities as well. I love Matilda as a queer movie. Miss Honey is, you know what, her sexuality is up for debate. And then I really love the artist B. Steadwell.
I guess my queer role models would be people like Frank Ocean, Kevin Abstract, and Tyler the Creator, but they are not necessarily my role models because they are queer. I admire them because of everything they stand for and the art they produce, part of which has to do with their experience being queer. As for the media that encapsulates the queer experience, I am not entirely sure because the experience is so different for everyone. My experience has been very tame and limited, as I only recently realized I was bisexual. I think the movies As You Are and Moonlight include interesting aspects of the queer experience, and there's an abundance of music from LGBTQ plus artists that does a great job of highlighting parts of what it is like to be queer.
My first thought is Dirty Dancing, and I'll explain why. It isn't queer, but it does. There's this moment where her father's like not speaking to her, and he's sitting out on like a pagoda looking over the lake. And if you've seen the movie, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, you might be confused. Just bear with me. And her dad's upset at her because she like did some things. She helped out a woman with getting an abortion, and she's like in love with this like dirty dancing man. Oh my gosh. And she kind of just says something along the lines of, you will promise that you would always love me. This is just a part of me. And I just feel like I'm not always going to be your perfect girl. And like, I'm my own person. And if you really love me, you also have to love this part of me. And there's tears. And the first time I saw it, I cried because it reminded me so much of my own experience. And I feel like that's probably an experience that a lot of people share, where it's, you know, I wasn't afraid of getting kicked out of the house when I came out. I was afraid of my parents just not loving me anymore. Which I think that it certainly felt like that happened.
So I think it's very important for us to learn about queer history, because this is how we actually fought for our rights. Because we didn't just protest and then we got our rights back. We had to riot, and we're still fighting every day, even today, in third world countries and countries that are not very acceptable of the queer community, like where I come from, like Egypt. It's literally illegal to be gay here, and you can be sentenced to prison. So it's very important to learn how we got here.
My understanding of queer history is extremely limited to pretty much just my own research. In school, I've never learned about queer history, or maybe in passing, but I've never done an in-depth kind of history lesson in queer history specifically. I do think it's really important to learn about. I think it's also important to kind of for us to move beyond the Stonewall riots and the more popular kind of or more well-known parts of queer history, and approach it from a more diverse lens historically.
I think you can never know too much. I want to know what came before me. I want to know who came before me and who pushed us far, if that makes sense.
Describe the most significant non-platonic relationship or crush in your life. I am dating someone right now. My boyfriend is really great. He's the most important, most significant partner I've had in my life so far. Yeah. Yeah, my current boyfriend is great. I don't know really what else to say besides the fact that he always makes me feel comfortable and he knows about my sexual identity and we talk a lot about the LGBTQ community.
Even though I'm 18, so I'm in my late teenage years, I feel like I haven't had a significant non-platonic relationship. I do crush on a lot of people, but 90% of those crushes are platonic, mainly like celebrities. And for some reason, I like to keep it that way. But yeah.
The one I'm in right now is most significant. It's the longest. It's long distance. It's coming up on 10 months, I think, with her. I definitely enjoy being with her though. It's really nice.
Psych ladies, I'm still single. I've lost all hope for high school romances. Anyways, my most significant crush turned out not to be a crush at all, but this one was still vastly different from the others. We had known of each other for 2 months before we actually exchanged any words, and our first full conversation blew me away. I was always the person reaching out to others if I wanted to make new friends, so you can imagine my surprise when someone reversed the roles. We were so in sync, we had the perfect rhythm for banter, and there weren't any uncomfortable moments. Our immediate connection threw me off, so I thought I had found my soulmate. Eventually, I overcame the initial shock and confirmed with myself that I had harbored no romantic feelings towards her.
So I was stage managing a lovely Shakespearean production. I was a scared little freshman, and then suddenly I was like, oh, shoot, that person does not fall into this category of straight that I am used to, and they're really hot. And that was a really weird time for me because I think, even though I think a lot of people have a lot of internalized homophobia, there is this sense of like, my heart, you know? And I think that's a really moving thing and can also be a really confusing thing. I know it was for me.
I mean, there's like the man-hating lesbian. I'm definitely not a man-hating lesbian because I do like men. I don't really. I mean, there's a stereotype that like same-sex female relationships move really quickly, and I think that's also true. But yeah, I mean, honestly, truly, I don't really face stereotypes. They don't affect me.
I have a pretty high voice, so definitely that stereotype where all gay guys have super high voices, and I'm pretty feminine, according to most people. So the flamboyant stereotype is definitely a thing.
A very main stereotype I face from straight guys mostly is that because I'm gay, I am literally attracted to every single straight person, or like every guy, which is not true, obviously.
One that sticks out is people doubting my attraction to men, especially since I've been in a long-term relationship with a girl. I find that semi-frequently I feel I have to prove my sexuality to those in my life, and it can even be close friends.
Privilege in the queer community definitely has to do with a few factors. For one, if you align with a more well-known identity, such as gay, bisexual, or lesbian, you have a higher chance of being accepted by your peers than if you identify as, for example, non-binary and pansexual.
I am privileged in just about every way a gay person can be. I am cisgender, white, I have American citizenship, I live in a place which was historically a haven for LA's gay community. I am socioeconomically well off, and my immediate family is very accepting. I also present myself extremely femininely, so unless I make a point of coming out to people, everyone just assumes I'm straight. Microaggressions are pretty prevalent, but being bi for me isn't like being black, indigenous, or another POC, a disabled person, a non-English speaker, or most other historically marginalized identities. I always have the choice, if I feel unsafe, to not express how I identify. And that's why white queer people have absolutely no excuse not to fight for the equality and justice of other minorities. A lot of us are in a unique position to leverage our privilege for change.
Privilege within the queer community, for me, is, I think, representation. A lot of people, a lot of white gay men see themselves in the media, not necessarily in a positive lens or in a positive light, but nevertheless they see themselves.
Being taken seriously in the queer community is a privilege. There have always been stigmas around Asian women and sexuality. It is often unthinkable for an Asian woman to embrace anything related to sexuality, since in many Asian cultures and in the heteronormative society we live in, women are painted as the symbol for innocence and purity, and the topic of sexuality is thought to take away those stereotypical qualities. When an individual is thought to be pure and innocent in that stereotypical sense, they aren't being taken seriously because they are degraded as someone who lives for others and not for themselves. This is a theme that may occur in the experience of other queer women of color.
I, as a cisgender white male, have a lot of privilege in life in general. In queer dating, I've heard a lot of racist and body-shaming preferences from queer people themselves. I've also heard a lot of shaming around the idea of gay men being feminine.
I and countless other queer people of color do not have the privilege to live comfortably with our sexualities in our own homes, and we, more often than not, resort to remaining in the closet. Being able to attend the Pride Parade may not be a huge deal for people whose families unconditionally support them, but it would, quite literally, be a giant leap for humankind for people who are not out. Even being able to help McKenna out without having to be anonymous is a privilege.
So I think that one thing I wish straight people knew about being queer is that it really, and this sounds maybe vague or cliche, but it really doesn't look the same for every person. And just like any other part of someone's identity, it could be a big part of their identity and a big part of their life and something that they want to talk about and, have it known. But it also could be something that is not really part of someone's life and is not something they really want known. And both are totally valid because the queer community is not one thing or another. And it's an intersection of obviously gender identity and sexual orientation straying from the norms. But it's also, a collection of people. So there's race, religion, nationality, disability, and et cetera, et cetera.
Being queer needs to be normalized. Again, I am lucky to live in a city where being bi is much more normalized, but the process of coming out feels weird to me. Do I really have to sit my close friends and family down to tell them that I'm into two genders? It frustrates me that I can't make a "she's hot" comment without people giving me surprised looks.
I would say support your friends, reassure them that the way their sexual orientation or gender identity won't change the way you see them and your love for them, and that can make a huge difference in them.
So I wish that straight people knew that it's still not socially acceptable to be queer everywhere you go, even if that's within the US, even if it's within Los Angeles, even if it's within your seemingly accepting community or school or a group of friends. Struggles for the queer community still very, very, very much exist and shouldn't be dismissed just because it seems like things are getting better, because it's hard. It's still really hard.
I feel like coming out as queer can kind of be inflated into this huge thing, and it changes the way that people perceive you. And I wish that straight people knew that, I've been queer my whole life. Nothing is changing. I'm just telling you new information. And I wish that didn't make me abnormal. I wish that just made me queer.
By showing kids at an early age that it is okay to be queer or be trans or be anything they feel like they are or should be, we can become a better and more accepting society. It's the way life should be.
Representation. With media taking over the world, I think representation is the best way to gain people's understanding. Not only does it feel nice to see a part of your identity portrayed on screen, but it will help to normalize these identities.
Holding your friends accountable for microaggressions If someone uses gay as a negative term, if someone is using queer slurs, homophobic slurs, just call them out and really hold them accountable for their actions, because it really can take a toll and really can negatively impact members of the LGBTQ community when they have to face those microaggressions and those attacks.
I think there's a lot that could be changed surrounding the idea of coming out as queer. The idea of coming out indicates that if someone has not come out, they are assumed to be straight. That straight is the normal. This can scare people who are queer because they fear being ostracized for coming out and discriminated based on their sexuality. I also think there is a strange stigma around guys that are queer, and guys are generally expected to be masculine and tough. If a guy were to come out as gay or bisexual, there would be a much different response from people than if a girl were to come out as those things. There is an idea that being queer isn't manly and discourages males from finding their true sexuality.
I think what first needs to change is that allies need to really look within themselves and reckon with their prejudices and their upbringings that maybe made them transphobic or homophobic. And not to say that the LGBTQ plus community is exempt from this, because I think there's definitely prejudice within the LGBTQ plus community. So it's important for all of us to recognize what biases we might have been brought up with. And then continue to fight for equal rights and basic universal rights for everybody in the LGBTQ plus community, especially the groups that we tend to forget about, like intersex folks, or we need to talk more about the intersection of being a person of color and being queer. And so we really need to actually include everybody when we fight for universal rights.
My personality doesn't change once I come out, and I want people to internalize that. I want to continue to be able to have the same conversations with my friends while playing video games like we always have. Again, my friends do accept queerness, but I think we must all do our part in moving our culture's acceptance to appropriate indifference, wherein I can be my friend's bro, not their queer bro.